Thank you, everybody, firstly for attending and giving me the opportunity to present at this Digital Finance Africa Forum, my first one, obviously, and a great to basically meet up with the peers in the industry, suppliers, other companies, and obviously take learnings that we come out through from this presentation. So the Foschini Group, some of you may be aware of them, basically a retailer based in South Africa, originally started in South Africa, and obviously has expanded globally. I'll talk a little bit about that from my side. So who am I? I've basically worked through in the financial services industry for Nedbank for a long time, and more recently with the Foschini Group. And obviously a little bit of what I basically do from my side is there around what has been delivered to date. Maybe my discussion today swings very much onto data analytics and what we're doing from the Foschini Group perspective to basically manage our business with regard to data. And I think you'll be quite amazed as to how we basically get down to the lowest level of data to make sure that we can actually run our business successfully. I want to start off maybe a little bit with a little bit of a cliche. Obviously, everybody's heard around, you know, that the full cliche that actually data is the new oil of the 21st century, and I think it's been thrown around a little bit. This is a little bit dry, but in essence, it's completely different from oil. If somebody buys all the oil, everybody else doesn't have any oil, whereas if you've got data, you basically have the opportunity to basically expand that data in your organization, to reuse that data in your organization, and like data, it basically also becomes stale at some point in time. So very different from that point of view. I think the second piece to talk about data, so you know, if we look at data from our side, what is the price of data? And if I think we think of that from an organization perspective, what do we basically bring the price of data to, and how do we basically value data? And data is valued when we're basically getting knowledge out of that data and we're making business decisions. So my presentation today specifically jumps onto that to basically talk through how we manage our business. I'm going to move through onto the Foschini Group. The presentation doesn't basically show it too well. On the right-hand side, basically South Africa, the group in terms of how big we are, TFG Africa in terms of our stores and our layout, basically London and then Australia. And then on the left-hand side, if you can see that, it's basically all the different brands and the variety that basically comes across from the Foschini Group. And the large amount of brands, as great as it is from a variety perspective, obviously internally brings quite a bit of variability and obviously complexity from a systems point of view for us to make sure that we get the data to the stores in the right place at the right time. In 2019, Bongiwe Ntuli basically joined the group as CFO. One of the first insights that she basically had was, in observations, was that we haven't invested sufficiently in our finance space, in our data analytics space, and how do we basically make sure that we get digital finance on the roadmap for her. And this presentation specifically is putting down the groundwork of what we've done to basically bring this digital finance function alive, and basically what we've done from a data technology perspective to basically take it forward. So what did we do? We basically put together a data strategy in terms of what we wanted to achieve from a financial reporting point of view. So I'm going to talk through a little bit of that. So access to all our relevant data, accurate and trusted data internally and externally, and obviously integrated seamlessly into the organization. Standardization of our reporting to the group. As I mentioned, the variability that we bring to the table among all the brands. If you can think about the 26 or 28 different brands that we have locally, and how we basically make sure that we standardize the reporting that we bring down for stores, and how we make sure that they basically get measured on key KPIs. Then basically having data that's easily available, that is secure, basically available to consume and understand and understood quickly. And then lastly, and you'll see this, that basically having data readily available real time. And that itself can be a cliche. I want my data real time, and you know, I need to see it real time, but how do we actually go about getting it done? So the two areas that I've highlighted, if you look at our landscape, when I talk on the left-hand side, PMM Merch is basically an ERP system. Our point of sale that sits in the stores, our foot counter devices, our other ERP that we have, Oracle HCM, other data that comes out of other systems. And then what we've basically done is implemented, we've originally had SAP as our financial management system, but implemented SAP BW to basically make sure that all our data from SAP move through into SAP BW. And then from a visualization point of view, we basically plugged Pyramid on top of it. Not a lot of organizations use Pyramid. We basically went through to market to basically look for a visualization tool that could give us the ability to actually get our KPI reporting and dashboards successfully delivered. And this is the product that we've basically chosen from our side, and that's now been plugged on top of our EDW in the organization. So digital boardroom. This is the success that we've basically delivered from a data point of view, and by no means it is perfect. I think it's very much work that's currently in progress since 2019, 2020, and obviously taking it live with a couple of the brands. The first piece is basically turnover system. So if you put yourself into a store, you're basically making a sale on our point of sale device, and we need to understand exactly what turnover and sales is being generated from each of the different stores by each of the different brands, and how we basically roll it up from an organization point of view. I send out every morning at 5 a.m. and at 9 a.m. all the key KPIs that have been achieved for the day, the previous day. I basically send it out 5 times a day, real time, to give the business the ability to see how their brands are basically transacting and how they're basically performing from a sales point of view. And then secondly, it gives the brands the ability to actually drill in and actually go and see why particular brands could be down or why particular stores could be down. So let's use the example of load shedding. Obviously, as much as we've basically talked about load shedding from a South African context point of view, there's been a lot of opportunity that's basically come about it as well. But if you think of load shedding, and if we basically see that turnover is not achieving the plans that we basically set out for the day, we can go in and actually look at where the areas are in forecasting in terms of where we've basically had impact from a load shedding point of view. What is our turnover? What are the areas that are basically impacted? And how do we basically make sure that those stores actually start getting our UPS devices, or that we basically make sure that we get their locations re-reviewed, etc. I'm now jumping through into digital boardroom. So for some of you, the data that's currently being presented is in my previous financial year. So financially, you shouldn't be too worried about it. So this is the first dashboard that I send out every morning from my side. I'm going to talk through some of the numbers. So on the top left-hand corner, for the day, the group basically traded at 133 million. We basically showed 2 figures in the top left-hand corner. The first one being what's our growth compared to last year, and we call it comp growth. Basically, there we're saying for the same amount of stores that we basically had for last year, how did we basically perform from our side? And that's important because actually I'll talk through the other one. The second piece on the left-hand side to it is basically what's the complete growth for last year. And if you look at the big difference between the two that's basically shown there, the one is all the acquisitions and new stores that have basically come about, and the growth that we're basically looking at there is that this is a like-for-like comparison to what we had in the industry last year from our stores point of view. Now, why is that important in terms of data? And I think that's the important thing. So what if? What does this actually mean? What it actually means is that when that number starts going down, what it actually says to you that actually our existing stores, because we've rolled out new stores, or potentially there's been other factors that are starting to cannibalize our existing stores. And it actually then drives the stores to actually start looking at, so okay, I've put another Markham that's very close to another one. What does it actually mean from a turnover perspective, and how has it impacted their turnover sales? The second piece that I want to talk through is very much the brands. So what we then show is we show each of the brands that have performed and achieved their 100%, some of the brands that are sitting in amber, and some of them that are sitting in red. And why they're sitting in red, why is it that they're sitting in the same centers that we basically have, and why they're not performing like some of the other brands? And those are the questions that we then start basically performing with ourselves within the group at head office to actually start making sure that we can get the right behavior and changes done. When we delivered this, we basically took it out first through to Jet. If you guys are aware, 2 years ago we purchased Jet and implemented it in TFG. It was a soft landing for us to actually take a new brand onto the new turnover system, and obviously with that, actually getting them to give us feedback and actually tweak our system to get sure that we could get the data in the correct places. My second one, I'm maybe going to ask just for a show of hands, does everybody know what Bash is? All right, so if you haven't downloaded Bash as an app, please download Bash as an app. It's basically our online app that we've basically gone live with earlier this year. Bash is our e-commerce site that we previously had. Before we had 12, 13, 14 sites. So you'd go to a sportscene.co.za, you'd go to fashini.co.za, you now go to Bash. What Bash basically does is it brings all the product together and it gives you a product view as opposed to a brand view. However, if you want to go through to Sportscene and still purchase that sneaker for your son because he says it's in Sportscene, you can easily find it as well. And just by making that change, we've actually seen a complete change with regard to how we perform from an e-commerce perspective. So maybe just some insights for you again on e-commerce. So if you look at that curve from an e-commerce perspective, I always fight with the brands and say, why is it that actually on Saturday and Sunday you basically go down? The whole week you perform well, but on Saturday and Sunday, well, there's many reasons they can give you. But one of the key reasons is that actually everybody goes out to a mall on Saturday or Sunday. They basically look at the product, they feel the product. They basically come back on a Saturday or Sunday and then purchase the product. And we didn't see the sale coming through on a Monday or Tuesday because we basically then, from that point of view, we fulfill it. So I then went through to ChatGPT. So on the right-hand side, if you look at ChatGPT, what I asked ChatGPT is, what is the proper curve that we should be having for online and for stores? And be it so that actually they came back with exactly that actually weekends will be low for online, and actually stores will be very high for weekends, and vice versa, basically playing itself out. What I loved about ChatGPT, if you can see the disclaimer that it put at the bottom as well for me. I'm moving through on to my next area, and this basically talks through cellular. So we basically sell cellular phones in each of our brands. We basically say to each of our brands, what are the type of phones that you want in there? So for example, Jet would be very different to a phone that I sold in Markham as an example. And then what I basically then do is I give them a view as to how many phones we've sold for the day. Now, if you look at some of the numbers that I've basically put down, but on a good day, we could basically be selling 10 million worth of cell phones in our stores. Now, what do we do with that data? What does it actually mean? We send it back through to our stores to actually say, these are the phones that are selling. These are the phones that are not selling. Why is it that you're basically sitting with an Apple, Apple 14 as opposed to actually having a Samsung A20? Because actually your brand should be actually using the opposite of that. And those are some of the questions we play back through to the brands from our side. What we also basically have is it drives customer behavior, right? So our margins are very low on cell phones, as everybody knows, but once they've walked into the store, they basically have a very good view from their side that actually maybe I would want to buy something in the store. Actually, maybe, you know what, let me just grab something else. And that then drives basically for them to purchase apparel. So customer behavior is that actually it is one of the things that they would do once they've basically decided to purchase a cell phone in the store. I'm going to move on and I'll take some questions a little bit at the end. I then bring in customer conversion. So this is where we've brought in big data into the ecosystem. So what we've done is basically put cameras as you enter the store. It basically looks at what the amount of customers are that are entering the store. We then basically look at what the turnovers were and sales were in the store, and we basically then say to the stores, so now that we can see you've had 20 customers that have walked in, but actually your turnover is basically reflecting this, why is your customer conversion not higher? We then put down those KPIs, and actually the stores, and if you look at that correlation between turnover and actually footfall, there's a direct correlation as to how we basically see it. And what we're now doing is basically putting these KPIs for stores so that they can actually make sure that the customer conversion is top of mind when they're basically managing their KPIs. So besides for turnover, actually what is else that you're basically starting to drive from that point of view? If you look at the foot counter, what I've also done with foot counter and turnover is taken that data into my workforce management solution. So we've gone with a product called Dayforce. We've put all the data into it. We've basically built the algorithms for each of the different brands. And what we've said to each of the different brands, on this day, you will have this staff that will come and basically service your customer, because actually you're going to be busy on this week, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. But you know what? Next week, Monday, actually is going to be quite quiet. You actually don't have to have 5 people there. You could actually have 2 people and you'll still manage. And that's actually starting to drive a whole lot of savings from a store perspective. Indirectly, we've actually brought down, interestingly, basically crime in the store, because actually you have more people on the floor at the right time so that people are not actually basically seeing things going missing from a store perspective. And then lastly, I'm going to talk through average basket size. So then I go into my merge data and I then basically say to each of the brands that these are the sales you've made for the day. This is how big your basket is. And obviously you can see at home's higher than, for example, somebody like Jet. You know, Jet would be 250 then, whereas at home could basically be sitting at a much higher value. And they then get measured on this KPI from their side compared to last year as well. I then basically talk through the data that we've put together, and I then say to them, that actually these are the centers and these are the stores that have performed well. And it drives competition among the brands as well. So what we then see is the discussion takes place that why is it that Markham in actually Mall of Africa has had a fantastic day when actually somebody like Union Denim or potentially Sports Scene hasn't had such a great day? What is that actually is defining why that brand is actually doing well in that mall, and why is it that actually you're not doing well? Start getting those store managers and area managers to be discussing to each other and actually making sure that we can start getting changes made in the respective brands. I want to close off around, and I know this is again a cliche, around top-down versus bottom-up. Everything I've shown you previously is basically top-down. We've put KPIs together, we send it out at head office, we basically send it to head of the financial area, we send it out through to the head of the brands, we send it through to all the brand managers, and that's great. But actually what happens in the store? So in the store, we basically have given them exactly the same reporting, and we actually give them the ability from their side to drill in by their store to actually say how they're tracking and how they're being managed from a KPI point of view. I close off. I try and look forward from my side as well, and obviously I've brought in terms of what Gartner is saying is happening from a digital and finance perspective to try and tick off as to how far we are away from where the benchmark should be. There's obviously areas around artificial intelligence and machine learning that I believe we need to be doing a lot more work in. And then obviously with regard to looking at futuristic platforms that come with embedded AI and machine learning as well. And those are some of the things that are on our radar. But to close off, I think UK and Australia data is sitting currently outside of these dashboards. I need to bring it in. It's important to track sales, but at the end of the day, we work on margin. Basically, I've just rolled out a project to make sure that every brand basically gets measured on exactly one margin from a group perspective. And that basically needs to be brought in to complement what the quality of sales are that we're sending in the stores. I need to bring in stock data and stock turn data to basically show the brands in terms of how they're performing from their stock perspective. I'm basically looking at optimizing the board packs that basically go out for our CFO Bongiwe, and what are we doing from an optimization point of view. I intend replacing our ERP SAP. I sit on SAP ECC 6, which is quite outdated and obviously a legacy. I want to bring in obviously a new finance to the cloud platform, which will obviously give me the ability to bring in further analytics and embedded AI and machine learning. And then largely the perception's still there. You're always slow, so we need to obviously be continuously looking at this from a people, process, and technology point of view. And I think we're on that journey now that we've been 3-4 years on this journey. It's now time for us to basically take it to the next level. So I'm going to open up to the floor maybe from a questions point of view while I basically go through just some of the TFG pictures to show you some of our DCs in terms of what we're doing, some of our brand data. Is there any questions? Thank you, everybody. Thank you again for the opportunity. Thank you.